It is early spring. Nothing looks different yet. The Doomsday Clock sits at 89 seconds to midnight, the closest it has ever been. The New START nuclear treaty between the United States and Russia expired in February with no replacement. There are approximately 12,200 nuclear warheads on Earth, around 2,100 of them on high alert, ready to launch within minutes. Multiple wars are active simultaneously, and most analysts agree that the greatest risk isn't that someone decides to start a world war. It's that no one decides anything and one happens anyway. So what would it actually look like? Not the Hollywood version, not the clean narrative of sides and fronts and declarations. The real version, the one military planners, war game theorists, and geopolitical analysts have been modeling for years. Here's what the evidence suggests. The trigger. World War III does not begin with a declaration. It begins with an incident. The most likely flashpoint, according to most analysts, is Taiwan. China has spent the last decade building the military capacity to take the island. A naval force now larger than the United States Navy in total ship count, a missile arsenal designed specifically to keep American carriers away from the strait, and an air force that has conducted dozens of incursion drills into Taiwanese airspace. The window the Chinese military planners have been working toward when they assess their forces are capable enough and American attention is divided enough is somewhere between now and 2030. The scenario most wargamers focus on is not a sudden full-scale invasion. It begins with a blockade. China announces that all shipping entering the Taiwan Strait must seek approval from Beijing. No shots fired, no troops on beaches, just a line drawn on a map and the question of who blinks first. The United States has a defense commitment to Taiwan. It must now decide whether to challenge the blockade. Every simulation the US military has run on this scenario has ended badly. In most of them, the United States takes significant losses in the first 72 hours. Hour 1. The conflict begins not with missiles, but with silence. Chinese cyber units, among the most capable in the world, spent months pre-positioning malware inside the infrastructure of Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and US military networks in the Pacific. The moment hostilities begin, the attacks activate simultaneously. Power grids flicker, communication satellites are jammed. The GPS signals that modern military operations depend on begin degrading. China has the capability to blind entire regions of the navigation spectrum. Financial markets, which are now deeply integrated with digital infrastructure, begin experiencing failures within minutes. In Washington, in Tokyo, in Brussels, decision-makers are trying to understand what is happening using systems that are no longer reliable. The fog of war, which military planners have studied for centuries, is now digital and instantaneous. The first 72 hours. China launches ballistic missiles at US air bases in Japan, Guam, and the Philippines, not to start a nuclear war, but to destroy the runways and logistics that would allow American air power to intervene in the strait. These are conventional missiles, but they are precise. There are hundreds of them. The bases are not destroyed, but they are degraded. Aircraft that were supposed to respond cannot take off. Ships that need resupply cannot get it. Taiwan's air defenses, which are sophisticated but outnumbered, are overwhelmed within the first day. Chinese air superiority over the strait is established. The blockade becomes a siege. NATO watches from across the Pacific, divided. The United States calls on its allies. Germany hesitates. France, still managing its own defense buildup, commits rhetorically but cautiously. Japan, which revised its pacifist constitution specifically in anticipation of this scenario, activates its self-defense forces. South Korea faces a different calculation entirely because North Korea is watching. The second front. This is where the war becomes a world war. North Korea, which has been coordinating with Russia and China in ways that intelligence analysts have been tracking for 2 years, sees an opportunity. US forces are committed in the Pacific. NATO is stretched. Kim Jong-un, who has been developing nuclear-capable ballistic missiles capable of reaching anywhere in the continental United States, makes a calculation that he will never have more leverage than he does right now. He doesn't launch. He threatens a credible, specific nuclear threat against Seoul, against Tokyo, against US bases in the region. The threat alone forces Washington to divert assets, missile defense, strategic bombers, diplomatic bandwidth away from Taiwan and toward the Korean Peninsula. That is exactly what it is designed to do. Meanwhile, Russia, whose war in Ukraine has been grinding for 4 years and whose economy is under severe strain, sees the same window North Korea sees. American attention is divided. NATO is focused east and west simultaneously. Russian forces probe the Baltic states, not an invasion. A provocation designed to force NATO to respond, to split alliance attention further, to exploit the gap. The alliance system that was supposed to prevent this is now being tested in 3 theaters simultaneously, with a 4th. Iran, whose nuclear program survived American bombing but whose government is increasingly cornered, watching and calculating. The nuclear question. This is where every model breaks down. Nuclear deterrence is built on a theory that the consequences of nuclear use are so catastrophic that no rational actor would ever cross that line. The theory has held for 80 years, but it was designed for a bipolar world of 2 superpowers with direct communication, established protocols, and decades of practiced crisis management. The world of 2026 is different. New START is gone. There are no formal communication structures between the United States and China equivalent to the old US-Soviet hotline. Tactical nuclear weapons, smaller, lower yield, designed for battlefield use rather than city destruction, have been incorporated into Russian military doctrine under a concept called escalate, to de-escalate. The idea is that using a single small nuclear weapon on a military target could shock the enemy into backing down without triggering a full strategic exchange. The problem is that every simulation of this theory ends the same way. Once the nuclear threshold is crossed, the logic of deterrence collapses. Each side, uncertain whether the other will stop at one weapon, has every incentive to act first. The escalation ladder, once started, has never been successfully stopped in any war game that military planners have been able to design. There are approximately 9,600 nuclear weapons in military stockpiles right now. The United States and Russia together hold around 90% of them. The global economy. The war doesn't have to go nuclear to be catastrophic. The Taiwan Strait handles roughly 40% of the world's container shipping. The South China Sea accounts for 1/3 of global maritime trade. The moment conflict begins in that region, insurance rates for shipping spike. They already jumped significantly during Houthi attacks in the Red Sea in 2024 and 2025. Within days of a Taiwan conflict, the cost of transporting goods across the Pacific becomes prohibitive. Supply chains that were already fragile from pandemic-era disruptions break entirely. Semiconductor production, most of which is concentrated in Taiwan and South Korea, stops. The chips that go into every car, every phone, every appliance, every military system, gone from the global supply for months or years. The last time a supply shock of even a fraction of this scale hit, it produced years of inflation and shortages worldwide. Energy markets follow. Oil and gas prices, already volatile, spike immediately on conflict news. Nations that depend on Russian energy, Europe, parts of Asia, face impossible calculations. The weaponization of energy, which Russia demonstrated in 2022, becomes a primary tool of warfare even before a single missile crosses a border. What stops it? The honest answer from most analysts is that they don't know. In previous world wars, the conflicts ended when one side's capacity for continued fighting was exhausted, physically, economically, politically. That logic still applies. But the speed at which modern warfare operates, the integration of nuclear weapons into military doctrine, and the absence of the crisis management structures that kept the Cold War cold all create a situation where the traditional off-ramps are harder to find. What most experts agree on is that the most likely path to de-escalation runs through parties who are not directly involved. India, which maintains relationships with both Russia and the West. Brazil, which has consistently positioned itself as a neutral broker. The United Nations, which is paralyzed on the Security Council, but still provides a forum where communication can happen. The other thing most experts agree on is that the most dangerous moment is not the beginning of the conflict. It's the period around day 15 to 30, when the initial military moves have been made. The economic consequences are becoming visible. Domestic political pressures are building on all sides. And the decision-makers who started the crisis are realizing that none of their models for how it would go were correct. That is the moment when miscalculation becomes most likely. And it is miscalculation, not intention, that has driven the closest calls in nuclear history, from a Soviet satellite false alarm in 1983 that nearly triggered a launch. The question isn't whether the world's militaries are ready for this war. They are. They've been preparing for it for years. The question is whether the world's leaders, operating under information warfare, under domestic political pressure, under the speed of modern events, are capable of not fighting it. That answer is still open. And it depends more than any military capability on decisions that haven't been made yet.